LOBISOMEM, Moon Hunt in Rural Portugal, by Mikey of Saltline Studio. They told her it was just a festival costume, a white dress, a ribbon. But when the moon rose over the mountains of Portugal, something ancient remembered her. And once it knows your scent, it never forgets. This is a folklore fiction story inspired by old European legends and Catholic symbolism. Some stories are not meant to be told loudly. She heard the howl before she saw the moon. It came from the hills beyond the village, low and patient, as if the night itself were breathing. For one suspended heartbeat, the countryside of Portugal lay perfectly still. No insects, no wind in the olive leaves, no distant church bells. Only mist drifting across broken stone, and the quiet certainty that something ancient had begun to move. Evie's heart ran, her breath shredded in her chest, as she fled down a lane that had once been a road, the hem of a white dress snagging and tearing on thorny weeds between the old cobbles. Fog rolled across the ground in pale sheets, curling around her ankles like hands that wanted to hold her still, and the air tasted of cold rock and crushed olive leaves. Behind her, something moved with the weight of a man and the certainty of a predator. Not sprinting, not rushing, walking, as if it already knew the ending. A full moon hung above Serra da Estrela like a silver coin pressed into the sky, bright enough to bleach the ruins ahead into bone and shadow. The old archway rose from the hillside like the ribs of a long-dead chapel, stone stacked by hands that had believed in saints and storms and the stubborn protection of walls. Evie did not believe in any of that tonight. She believed in the sound she had heard 10 seconds ago, the wet click of a jaw reshaping itself. She looked back once. A man-shaped figure emerged from the fog, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in black, like a mourner who had lost the right to grief. His coat hung in tatters, flapping at his knees. His face was wrong. Skin stretched tight over features that still remembered being human, but the eyes burned like embers trapped behind glass. Yellow. Hungry. Familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. He lifted his head slightly, and the air trembled with a low growl that was not a warning. It was a promise. Evie. Maya's voice echoed from somewhere ahead. This way. Evie turned forward and ran harder, the white dress fanning behind her like a ghost trying to keep up with its own funeral. But the hunt had not begun here. It had begun 3 hours earlier. 3 hours earlier, it had been laughter. The quinta had glowed with strings of warm lights hung between olive trees, the estate's stone courtyard alive with music and clapping hands. Someone had poured Evie a glass of Vinho Verde that tasted like summer apples, and an old woman with sharp eyes had taken her hands and smiled as if she'd been waiting for her. Linda, the woman said. Beautiful. Then she had produced the dress like it was a harmless joke. A costume for the festival. A little tradition the tourists could wear for photographs. White fabric, soft and flowing, embroidered with tiny gold threads that winked in candlelight. A wreath of olive leaves. A ribbon tied around her wrist. Bride of the harvest, Tiago had explained, grinning. He was the local guide who'd brought them here. All charm and dark curls, and an accent that made everything sound like a secret worth keeping. It's nothing. Just old theater. The old woman's fingers had been cold as she knotted the ribbon. And the moment the knot tightened, a dog in the courtyard had started barking so violently it choked itself, backing away from Evie as if she'd become a fire. Evie had laughed then. Everyone had. Maya had taken photographs. Layla had filmed it for her followers, spinning Evie around so the dress caught the light. Jonah had whistled and called her a vision, and Maya had elbowed him and told him to stop flirting with other women, even as a joke. The night had felt like magic, the good kind. But the old woman, Dona Celeste, Tiago called her, hadn't laughed. She'd watched Evie with an expression that looked like sorrow dressed up as celebration. And when Evie caught her eye across the courtyard an hour later, Dona Celeste had been crying. They left the quinta too late. Tiago had offered to let them stay overnight, but Jonah was driving, and Jonah didn't drink, and they'd already paid for the hotel in Mantegas. It was only 40 minutes away. The roads were empty. What could happen? The answer came 15 minutes into the drive, when the fog rolled down from the mountains like something being poured. Bloody hell, Jonah muttered, slowing the rental car to a crawl. The headlights cut through the mist in 2 weak cones that showed nothing but gray and the suggestion of stone walls on either side. Can barely see the road. GPS says straight for another 3 kilometers, Maya said from the passenger seat, her phone glowing in her lap. Then a left, toward the village. Layla was in the back with Evie, still scrolling through her footage. God, this fog is actually gorgeous. Very moody. Very brand. Your brand is going to be died in a ditch if we crash, Maya said. Relax. Jonah's got it. Evie didn't say anything. She was watching the darkness beyond the window. The white dress pooled around her like spilled milk. The ribbon was still on her wrist. She'd meant to take it off, but every time she reached for it, something distracted her. Now, in the fog, she found herself pressing her thumb against the knot. It felt warm. That was when the first howl came. It rose from somewhere to the left, long and low and wrong. Not a dog. Not quite a wolf. Something in between that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Jonah slowed the car further. What was that? Wolves? Layla said, but she didn't sound certain. Portugal has wolves, right? In the mountains. Yeah, Maya said, but they don't come near roads. The howl came again, closer now. And this time it ended in something that sounded almost like a word. A name. Evie's name. She felt the cold before she understood it. A draft that shouldn't have been there, curling through the car like a living thing. Her breath fogged in front of her face. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Jonah, Maya said quietly, drive faster. I can't see the shape came out of the fog like a nightmare deciding to be real. It landed on the hood of the car with a sound like a thunderclap. And for one frozen moment, Evie saw it clearly through the windshield. A man's body, broad and powerful, dressed in the ruins of a black coat. Hands that ended in claws, curved like sickles. And a face that had started human, but forgotten how to finish. Jaw too long, teeth too many, eyes burning yellow in the headlights. It looked directly at Evie. It smiled. Jonas screamed and yanked the wheel. The car spun, tires shrieking on whetstone, and the creature leaped off the hood as they careened toward the edge of the road. Evie felt the impact before she heard it. The crunch of metal against rock, the explosion of the airbags, the world turning sideways and then stopping with a violence that rattled her teeth. Silence. Then Maya's voice, high and thin. Everyone out. Everyone out now. They ran. There was no discussion, no plan. Jonah had blood on his forehead from where he'd hit the steering wheel, but he was moving, pulling Maya from the wreck, while Layla scrambled through the back door. Evie followed, the white dress tangling around her legs, and then they were all standing on the road in the fog, breathing hard, staring at the darkness. What the hell was that? Layla's voice was shaking. What the actual hell? Doesn't matter, Jonah said. We need to move. There's a village ahead, Maya said. How far? I don't know. My phone's in the car? Then we walk until we we find it. They started down the road, keeping close together. Jonah in front with his hands raised like he could fight off the night. The fog swallowed them within seconds. Evie's bare feet, she'd lost her shoes somewhere in the crash, burned against the cold stones. The ribbon on her wrist throbbed like a second heartbeat. She could feel something watching them, something patient, something that knew exactly where they were going. The first sign was the smell. It came from behind them, cutting through the cold. Copper and musk, and something older, something that smelled like churches left to rot. Evie turned and saw nothing but fog. But she heard it. Footsteps that weren't quite footsteps. The drag of something heavy, faster. She whispered. They ran. The road curved upward, climbing toward a ridge, and the ruins appeared like bones emerging from the earth. Stone walls, half collapsed, an archway that had once been part of something sacred. Beyond it, the ground dropped away into a shallow valley, and Evie could see, barely through the mist, the distant lights of a village. There, Maya pointed. We can make it. They pushed through the archway, and that was when Jonah stopped. He'd heard it too. The voice, his mother's voice, calling his name from somewhere in the fog behind them. Jonah? The sound was sweet, familiar, impossible. Jonah, sweetheart. Where are you? That's not. Maya grabbed his arm. That's not your mom. She's in Leeds. Jonah, look at me. That's not her. But he was already turning, his eyes wide and wet, and Evie remembered what Dona Celeste had said at the party. A warning she'd thought was just local superstition. When the old ones speak with voices they've stolen, you must never answer. You must never look back. Jonah, don't. He looked back. The creature came out of the fog like a wave breaking against shore, silent and inevitable. It moved faster than anything that Sai should move, closing the distance in 3 strides, and Evie saw its claws flash in the moonlight as it reached for him. Jonah didn't scream. He did something worse. He said, run in a voice so calm, it sounded like goodbye. Then the fog swallowed him, and there was only the sound, brief and terrible and cut short, of something ending. Maya screamed. Layla screamed. Evie grabbed them both and pulled them through the archway, down the slope, toward the lights of the village, and behind them the creature howled again, long and triumphant and satisfied. Jonah was gone. They kept running. The village was called Casa Velhos, and it was dying the way all mountain villages die, slowly, with dignity, its young people gone to Lisbon and its old people left to keep the bells ringing. Evie and Maya and Layla reached it at a stumbling run, their breath ragged, their faces streaked with tears. The main street was narrow and dark, stone houses pressing close on either side, and every window was shuttered. Every door was locked. Help? Maya pounded on the nearest door. Please, someone help us. Nothing. Layla tried another house. There's something out there. We need help. A light went out in an upstairs window. Deliberate. Pointed. They're not going to help us, Evie said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Flat and far away. Like she was narrating someone else's nightmare. They know what's out there. They've always known. Then, what do we do? Maya was crying now, properly crying, and Evie had never seen her like this. Maya was the practical one, the one who had a plan for everything. Evie, what do we do? Before Evie could answer, the men appeared. There were 3 of them, emerging from an alley like shadows given purpose. They were dressed in rough wool and leather, local farmers by the look of them. and each one carried a knife. Old knives, the blades pitted with age, the metal dark as dried blood. "You brought it here," the oldest one said. His face was weathered and grim. "You're the one in the white dress. I didn't bring anything. I don't even know what that thing is." "LOBISOMEM," another man said, spitting the word like a curse. "The wolf that walks like a man. It hasn't hunted in 20 years. Now you come to our village dressed like a bride, and it wakes. We didn't mean to. Doesn't matter what you meant." The oldest man raised his knife. "It's marked you. We can smell it on you, the way you smell like iron and fear. The only way to save our village is to give it what it wants. You're going to kill us?" Layla's voice cracked. "You're going to sacrifice us to that thing, not kill." "Lead." The man's eyes were tired, not cruel. "We'll take you to the old chapel on the hill. It can't enter holy ground. We'll leave you at the boundary, and maybe it takes you and leaves our homes alone." "That's insane," Maya said. "That's murder. That's survival." The man gestured with his knife. "Move." They moved. Evie didn't know what else to do. The men had knives, and somewhere in the fog behind them, the LOBISOMEM was still hunting. The chapel seemed as good a destination as any. The streets of Case Veljos wound upward, climbing toward a small church that sat at the village's highest point. It was old. Older than the houses around it, older than the roads. Its stone walls thick and dark, its bell tower rising into the mist like a single raised finger. A light burned in one of its windows. "The priest is still awake," the youngest knife man muttered. "Good. He'll know what to do." "I thought you wanted to feed us to the monster," Layla said bitterly. "We want to live. If the priest has another way, we'll take it. We're not evil, Senhora. We're just afraid." They reached the chapel door, and it opened before anyone could knock. The man standing there was old but not frail, his white hair cropped close to his skull, his eyes dark and deep-set in a face that had seen too much. He wore a simple black cassock, and around his neck hung a silver cross that caught the moonlight. "Father Thomas," the oldest knife man said, "we have a problem. I heard the howling." The priest's voice was calm, almost resigned. "I've been waiting. Bring them inside." The chapel was small and cold, lit by a dozen candles that flickered in the drafts. The walls were bare stone, decorated only by a simple wooden crucifix and a painted icon of the Virgin that looked centuries old. The air smelled of incense and something older, prayer, perhaps, accumulated over generations. Evie felt something shift as she crossed the threshold. The pressure she'd been feeling since the ribbon was tied, the sense of being watched, of being hunted, lessened slightly. Not gone, but muffled, like a sound heard through water. "You're safe here," Father Thomas said, closing the door behind them. "The creature cannot cross consecrated ground. It will rage at the boundary, but it cannot enter." "Why?" Maya asked. "What is it?" The priest gestured for them to sit on the wooden pews. The knife men remained standing by the door, their weapons still drawn. "What the village calls it is LOBISOMEM, a werewolf in your English. The stories say it's a man cursed by the devil, or a seventh son of a seventh son, or someone who forgot their baptism. But those are just stories. Ways for simple people to explain something they don't understand." "Then what is it really?" Evie asked. Father Thomas looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were tired, but there was something else in them, too. A knowledge that weighed on him like a physical burden. "Do you believe in angels, Senhora?" I don't know. Most people don't. Not truly. They believe in the idea of angels, beautiful messengers, harps and halos, guardian spirits watching over children. But the old texts describe them differently. They were soldiers, warriors, powers beyond human comprehension who fought wars we cannot imagine. He sat down across from her, his hands folded in his lap. And some of them fell. You're talking about the devil. I'm talking about what came before the devil had that name. The rebellion, the war in heaven, when a third of the host turned against their creator and were cast down. He paused. The church teaches that they fell into hell. But hell is not a place you can point to on a map. It is a state of being, a separation. And some of those fallen beings, when they struck the earth, did not descend further. They broke upon the stone of this world like burning iron. And what remained learned to wear faces. The chapel was very quiet. Evie could hear her own heartbeat. You're saying that thing out there is a fallen angel? I'm saying it's a remnant, a residue, the echo of something that once warred against God himself, now reduced to hunger and instinct and rage. Father Tomas touched his cross. Portugal didn't make it. The moon only wakes what was already sleeping. Why does it want me? Evie's voice was barely a whisper. What did I do? The ribbon? The priest nodded toward her wrist. May I see it? Evie held out her arm. The ribbon was simple white silk, but in the candlelight she could see something she hadn't noticed before. Tiny marks woven into the fabric, symbols that looked almost like writing. This came from Dona Celeste's family, Father Tomas said. Her grandmother's grandmother found it in the ruins on the hill, in a stone box sealed with prayers. It is a relic, not holy, but not entirely corrupt either. A thing from the old war, left behind like shrapnel in a wound, and it marked me, it bound you. The creature senses that binding. It recognizes the ribbon as something from its own nature, something it lost perhaps when it fell. It wants it back. And because the ribbon is tied to you, he didn't finish the sentence. So if I take off the ribbon, it stops hunting me? The ribbon cannot be untied by mortal hands. I've tried, with others who were marked. The knot will only release at dawn, when the moon sets. Until then, you are bound. Then we wait. Maya's voice was hard, determined. We stay here until dawn, and then we leave. And we never come back to this country. It's not that simple. One of the knife men stepped forward. The creature won't just wait. It knows she's here. It will circle the boundary, looking for a way in. And if it can't find one, it will take its rage out on the village, our homes, our families. So, what do you suggest? We draw it away. The man looked at Father Tomas, like my father did 20 years ago. Take the marked one to the ruins on the hill. Let the creature follow, and trap it there until dawn. Your father died doing that. My father bought the village 20 years of peace. The man's voice was steady. I'm willing to do the same. They argued. Maya said it was insane. Layla said she wasn't going back out there for anything. The knife men said they didn't have a choice. Father Tomas said he would go with them, that his prayers might offer some protection. Evie listened to all of it, and she thought about Jonah. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't calculated the odds or weighed his options. He'd just said run, and turned to face the thing in the fog, knowing what it would cost him. She wasn't brave like Jonah. She knew that. But she also knew that if she stayed here, cowering in the chapel while the creature tore through the village looking for her, she'd never forgive herself. I'll go, she said. Everyone stopped talking. The thing wants me. If I go to the ruins, it follows. If I stay, people die. That's not really a choice. Evie, no, Maya started. Come with me. Stay close. Father Tomas said prayers help. The knife men have iron. That wounds it, right? If we can keep it busy until dawn, the ribbon releases and it loses interest. That's a lot of ifs, Layla said. I know. But Jonah didn't have any ifs at all, and he still did what he did. I owe him at least this much. Father Tomas stood. Then we go together. I have holy water and salt. The creature cannot abide either. We make a stand at the ruins, and we pray for sunrise. They left the chapel at midnight. The fog had thickened, turning the village into a labyrinth of gray shapes and muffled sounds. Father Tomas led the way, a small vial of holy water in one hand and his rosary wrapped around the other. The knife men flanked them, their blades catching the faint moonlight. Maya and Layla stayed close to Evie, their hands finding hers in the dark. The creature's howl rolled down from the hills as they emerged into the open. It knew. It always knew. Quickly now, Father Tomas said. The ruins are 10 minutes up the path. Stay together, and whatever you hear, do not answer. They climbed. The path wound between olive trees and stone walls, the same route Evie had run earlier that night. Her feet were numb now, beyond pain, but she kept moving. The white dress dragged in the mud behind her like a surrender flag. Halfway up, the creature showed itself. It emerged from the trees to their left, not attacking, just watching. Its yellow eyes tracked them as they walked, and Evie could see its mouth moving slightly, shaping sounds that weren't quite words. Don't look at it, Father Tomas said. Don't engage. It's testing us. It's playing with us, the oldest knife man corrected. It knows we're going to the ruins. It's hurting us there. Then we give it what it wants. Keep moving. They kept moving. The ruins appeared through the fog like a skeleton rising from the earth. The archway still stood, though the walls around it had crumbled into piles of mossy stone. Beyond it, a flat expanse of rock formed a natural circle, surrounded by the remnants of what might once have been a tower. This was a chapel once, Father Tomas said as they entered, before the village church was built. The stones were blessed long ago. The creature can enter, but it will be weakened here. The ground was blessed once. This is where we make our stand. The knife men began laying out a circle of salt on the stone floor, while Father Tomas sprinkled holy water at the cardinal points. Maya and Layla huddled in the center, their faces pale in the moonlight. Evie stood at the edge of the archway, looking out into the fog. She could feel it coming. The LOBISOMEM came from above. It leaped from what remained of the tower wall, landing in the center of the salt circle with a force that cracked the stone beneath it. The salt hissed where it touched the creature's skin, thin wisps of smoke rising from its feet. But it didn't stop. It turned in a slow circle, taking in the humans who surrounded it, and its mouth split into something that might have been a grin. Iron, the oldest knife man said, and he lunged. The blade caught the creature in the shoulder, biting deep, and the LOBISOMEM shrieked, a sound that was half human, half something else entirely. It backhanded the man across the ruins, sending him crashing into the remains of a wall, and then it pulled the knife from its flesh and let it drop to the ground. Black blood dripped from the wound. It didn't heal, but it didn't slow the creature down either. Holy water. Father Tomas threw the contents of his vial at the LOBISOMEM's face. The liquid sizzled on contact, and the creature recoiled, clawing at its eyes, and for a moment it was blind and vulnerable. The second knife man took his chance. He drove his blade into the creature's back, aiming for the heart. and the LOBISOMEM howled and spun and caught him by the throat. No, Evie screamed, but it was already too late. The creature lifted the man off the ground with one hand and looked at him the way a cat looks at a bird. Then it squeezed. The sound was quick, terrible, final. The LOBISOMEM dropped the body and turned toward Evie. You, it said. The word was broken, malformed, like a sound being dragged through gravel, but it was unmistakably human, unmistakably intentional. You wear what was mine. The creature took a step toward her, then another. The salt was still burning its feet, leaving scorched prints on the stone, but it didn't seem to care. Give it back? I can't. Evie's voice was shaking. The knot won't release until dawn. Then I wait. The creature smiled with too many teeth. I have waited centuries. A few more hours is nothing. You've forgotten, Father Tomas said, stepping forward with his rosary raised. You've forgotten what you were and what you fought against. The light that cast you down still burns. The word that unmade your rebellion still echoes. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. The LOBISOMEM turned on him with a snarl. Your words are echoes of echoes, priest. They wound, but they do not kill. Nothing in this world can kill what we became. Then you admit it. The priest's voice was steady, despite the fear in his eyes. You are not a cursed man. You are not a demon, summoned by village witches. You are something older, something that fell. The creature went still. We do not speak of the fall, but I do. I've read the old texts. I've seen the names scratched into stone in churches older than Portugal. Anakoff, the secret keeper. The one who recorded every betrayal, every rebellion, every fallen star. Father Tomas took another step forward. You know that name. It's written in the wound you carry. For a long moment, nothing happened. The creature stared at the priest, and something shifted in its yellow eyes. Something that might have been memory or pain, or the shadow of whatever it had been before it broke upon the earth. Then it laughed. The sound was horrible. A mockery of human mirth, sharp and bitter and ancient. You think naming me gives you power. You think your old books contain anything but fragments? The war you speak of destroyed things you cannot imagine. What remains of us is debris, shrapnel. We remember nothing but the hunger. I don't believe that. Father Tomas held up his cross. I believe that somewhere inside you, the thing you were still exists, and I believe that thing can choose to stop. The LOBISOMEM's laughter died. Its face twisted, and for one moment, just one, Evie thought she saw something human in its eyes. Something lost and sad and impossibly old. Then it lunged. Father Tomas went down beneath the creature's weight, and Evie heard him cry out once before the sound was cut short. But he'd done something. She saw it in the flash of silver, driven the cross into the creature's chest. The LOBISOMEM screamed and reared back, clawing at the metal embedded in its flesh. Smoke poured from the wound, black and foul-smelling, and the creature staggered, weakened, but not defeated. Run? Father Tomas's voice was thin, broken. The cross will hold it. Run? They ran. Maya grabbed Evie's hand and pulled her through the archway, Layla stumbling behind them. The third knife man, the one who'd been thrown against the wall, was somehow on his feet, limping but alive, and he led them down the path toward the village. Behind them, the LOBISOMEM screams echoed off the hills. Rage and pain twisted together into a sound that would haunt Evie's dreams for the rest of her life. They didn't stop running. until they reached the chapel. The door was still unlocked. They piled inside, slamming it behind them, and Evie felt the pressure of the creature's attention lift slightly as they crossed the threshold. It couldn't follow. Not here. Father Tomas. Maya gasped. We have to go back for him. He's gone. The knife man's voice was hollow. I saw the creature take him down. He gave his life so you could escape? No. There has to be something we can do. There's nothing. Evie's voice was quiet, certain. The priest knew what he was doing. He wounded it. He bought us time. Time for what? Evie looked toward the eastern windows of the chapel. The sky beyond the glass was still dark, but there was a quality to the darkness that hadn't been there before. A suggestion of gray at the very edge of the horizon. Time for sunrise. They waited. The LOBISOMEM came down from the ruins an hour later, its howls audible even through the chapel walls. It circled the boundary of consecrated ground, scratching at the invisible line that held it back, and sometimes Evie could hear it speaking in that broken gravel voice, calling her name, promising things, threatening things. She didn't answer. She sat in the pew closest to the altar, the white dress torn and muddy around her, and she watched the eastern windows with a focus that bordered on prayer. The sky, lightened by degrees, gray became pale blue. Pale blue became the first hint of gold. And as the sun crested the mountains of Serra da Estrela, the ribbon on Evie's wrist fell away. It simply released. The knot that had been impossible to untie simply came apart, and the silk slipped to the floor of the chapel like a shed skin. Evie stared at it for a moment, then kicked it away from her. Outside, the howling stopped. They waited another 10 minutes before anyone moved. Then the knife man opened the chapel door, and the morning light spilled in like a blessing. The village was quiet. The fog had burned away, and the sky was clear and blue and impossibly innocent. Birds were singing in the olive trees. There was no sign of the LOBISOMEM. Is it over? Layla asked. For now. The knife man stepped outside, scanning the hills with wary eyes. It'll sleep again. Now that the ribbon is loose. Maybe for another 20 years. Maybe longer. We can only hope. Father Tomas, Maya said. And the man who, the other one who, we'll bury them properly. Say the right prayers. They died defending others. That matters. Evie walked out of the chapel on numb legs. The world felt strange and too bright after the nightmare of the night. Part of her expected to wake up, to find herself back in the rental car with Jonah at the wheel, and the whole thing just a bad dream. But the blood on her dress was real. The scratches on her feet were real. And when she looked up at the ruins on the hill, she could see a thin column of smoke rising from where they'd made their stand. We need to leave, she said. Today. Now. The police, Maya started. Tell them whatever you want. Car crash. Got lost in the fog. Jonah fell. Evie's voice cracked on his name. They won't believe the truth. No one would. And what is the truth? Layla asked quietly. What do we tell ourselves when we wake up screaming at 3 a.m.? Evie thought about Father Tomas and the things he'd said about fallen angels and ancient wars and beings that broke upon the earth like burning iron. We tell ourselves that some things are older than stories, she said, and some fights never really end. They just pause. She turned and walked down the hill toward the village, toward whatever came next. Behind her, carried on the morning wind, she could have sworn she heard a whisper. I know you're sent now, bride. I will remember. Evie didn't look back. The apartment, was too quiet. Evie sat at her desk, staring at a document she'd read 4 times without processing a single word. Outside her window, London hummed with its usual indifferent energy, cars and voices, and the distant wail of a siren. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But at night, when the city went to sleep, she heard other things, scratching at her window. 3 floors up, footsteps in the alley below, too heavy and too slow. And once, just once, a voice that sounded like Jonah, calling her name from somewhere far away. The doctors said it was trauma. PTSD. Survivor's guilt manifesting as auditory hallucinations. They gave her pills and told her to sleep more and suggested she see a therapist who specialized in grief. She took the pills. She didn't sleep. The ribbon had been left in Portugal abandoned on the chapel floor. But sometimes late at night, Evie found herself reaching for her wrist, pressing her thumb against skin that still remembered the warmth of that impossible knot. It's over, she told herself. It can't follow you here. You're safe. But she'd been reading in the weeks since she got home, searching online forums and academic papers and dusty corners of the internet where people talked about things that shouldn't exist. And she'd found references, scattered, fragmentary, impossible to verify, to similar creatures in other countries, other remnants, other echoes of that ancient war. One name kept appearing, Onikov. She didn't know what it meant, not yet, but Father Thomas had spoken of a secret, something the creature feared to remember, something that might explain what these things were and why they hunted, and whether there was any way to stop them. Somewhere out there, that secret was waiting. Evie closed the document on her screen and opened a new browser tab. She typed a search query she'd been avoiding for days. Secret of Anikov Fallen Angels, Nephilim Folklore. The results were thin. A few conspiracy theory sites, a reference to an obscure medieval text, a travel blog about unusual church architecture in Eastern Europe. But at the bottom of the first page, almost hidden among the noise, was a link to a forum post from 3 years ago. The username was anonymous. The title was simple. If you've seen them, you need to know you're not alone. And there's more to the story than anyone wants to admit. Contact me. A survivor. Evie clicked the link. Outside her window, the moon was rising. And somewhere in the darkness of rural Portugal, in the ruins on the hill above Cacé Velhos, something that had slept for centuries was dreaming of white dresses and stolen ribbons and the taste of fear. It had time. It could wait. But sooner or later, it would hunt again. They always did. The end. Cuando a lua chama, ninguém corre mais rápido do que a maldecao. When the moon calls, nobody runs faster than the curse. Thank you for listening to LOBISOMEM, Moon Hunt in Rural Portugal. This tale is part of a growing collection of dark folklore stories drawn from forgotten roads, ancient prayers, and legends that refuse to sleep. If you walk these roads with us, subscribe for more stories from the hidden world behind the Siquijor Chronicles, a forthcoming novel series launching March 2026. Until next time, keep your salt lines drawn and never trust the full moon.